Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Offside Hockey Talk, where hockey comes to talk. Our screen looks a little different today. James couldn't be with us, but he is on his way back from his cottage, so we hope all is good with him. Today's show, we got a very special guest, the owner of Recruit Scouting, Gavin Chiasson. How's it going, Gavin?
Pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. And as always, we got Pete the Heat on the mic.
Good to have you, Gavin. Of course, Dylan butchered your last name.
Again, after I practiced it. But all good.
No worries.
So, first question off the board. We wanted to know how you got started in scouting and draft work.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an interesting story. I guess right before we sort of started this podcast, I told you guys where I'm from. Yeah. And a small town between two big cities, right? And I had sort of paid attention to the NHL draft, like back in, I would say 2017 was really like the first year where I really paid attention. But shortly after that, I guess 2018, 2019, two local kids from our town were playing AAA, their U16 AAA season. Okay. And I really kept up with that. And I got super big into like the OHL draft and was just sort of following I just keep track of those two, I guess. But then fell in love with some other names, like that 03 crop was decently strong. So yeah, I did a lot of that. And like that Sudbury 03 crop was extremely strong, like strongest that Sudbury team has been. So I did that, but then sort of throughout the year, I started to get more involved in the NHL as well. And then once like they were out of their U16 year, it was pretty much from 2019 on, fully NHL stuff. I'm starting to get back into the OHL stuff, just because I know that's kind of where you need to get a little bit of a start. If you haven't played in the NHL and you want to be an NHL stick scout, you have to find your legs in a junior league.
Absolutely.
So I'm starting to get back into that. I've went to the past few OHL Cups post-COVID, whenever that year was the first year, and I just went since then, and I plan on going next year. Nice. I coached the Sudbury 2008 group, which is also a pretty strong group.
How long have you done coaching for?
Oh, last season was my first season, really.
Oh, nice. Okay. How are you liking it?
Loved it. I'm taking a year off though, just to focus on scouting, and it's my final year of school.
Yep.
So I figured I would do that and maybe pick up a coach here and there, but not like a, big position with the team, just when I can help out.
Yep.
But yeah, that's what I'm looking to do, and just sort of grow my name more and more and meet more people.
Now, are you taking something in school for this, or is this totally just your side thing?
Just my side thing. I've always sort of kept it as a backup plan, and I know SPAD exists and whatnot, but it's I'm trying to put this in a polite way. I'm not trying to poop on SPAD or whatever, but I just find it's very hard to get out of that into your position.
Yeah.
And you could, I don't want to say just as easily do it, but you can still do it without getting that degree. I mean, like, take me, I'm not in that. I like own my own scouting service, and I feel like we've been very successful, especially this year. This year we've ran numbers up like never before.
Nice.
But yeah, so I'm in a dual degree. It's sort of 2 degrees at once. So I'm getting my major and minor in geography and history, and then working towards an education degree for teaching as well.
Nice. Wow. Nice. You are a very, very busy man, and I don't mean that lightly.
I'm what?
I said you are a very busy man, and I don't mean that lightly.
I've got like 3 jobs right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you want to get into basically what Recruit Scouting is? That you're the owner of this company, correct?
Right.
So just give us a little breakdown what it is and what exactly you do.
Yeah. So I sort of started it up as like an Instagram scouting page.
Yeah.
And like those 2 local guys, I was like, share this on your story, man. Like, try to hype this up a little bit, and they did. But then COVID hit, and it sort of shut down my school year.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of money in the bank, and kind of thought like, well, it's not going to go anywhere, and those COVID checks are coming in. I'm like, I'm going to turn this into a website and see where this goes. And reached out to a couple of my buddies that I'd made on Twitter for hockey, and a couple of them were willing to join. And I was like, okay, this is going to be in full effect. And I'm not a tech guy at all. We had to hire someone pretty much right away to sort of make the site look pretty. I want to say the first 2 months, it just looked like a Google document with a domain name, and it was just the ugliest thing. And then he sort of fixed it up to what you see today when you go on the webpage. Like, that's sort of been our thing since we started, and he made that. And so we do a lot of NHL scouting. We've got scouts pretty much from everywhere, like Western Canada, Eastern Canada. The US, we have a few. It's very difficult to get European scouts.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the exact reason is. Like, even other companies that have European scouts, it's limited compared to the North American scouts. So we have Instat just to, sort of watch overseas. We have 2 in the Czech Republic, 1 in the UK.
That's pretty cool.
And we have 1 is Russian. I'm not sure if they're living in Russia right now or if they are living in the States or Canada, but like, they are full-blown Russia, like from there. And they do our Russia area.
Nice.
So yeah, that's been awesome. And we've had in the past a Scandinavian scout from the area.
Nice. Busy man.
Yeah.
Now, we kind of talked about it a little bit before, and we talked about, obviously, you put together your list, but now, in your opinion, is this draft deep, or is it kind of just first round heavy? And I know I've heard opposite opinions from the 32 Thoughts podcast, and I just wanted to get your opinion. Do you think this is a deeper draft, or do you think this is just kind of a little bit more top heavy and it just kind of thins out as the rounds go on?
So it's sort of weird. This sort of being the third full year that I've done like a draft guide.
Yep.
Granted, the first year that I did it was like really short, only top 100 players. And I pretty much did it just like a week going up to the draft. I did not edit it after I wrote it. So right. I still don't even know how sloppy it came out. I just sort of put it out and I was like, whatever. Even the past 2 that are bigger, a lot of hours go into it. But now both years I've sort of looked back and like, I should have started this earlier. Like, there might be some sloppy parts as well, but I compared to last year, I would say it's definitely deeper.
Yeah.
But honestly, the talent level, I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if it's because there's so many strong people that it might not stick out right now.
Yeah.
But I found it sort of average. Like, you've got your top heavy, like there are so many first line players. There are so many franchise players. There's a possible generational player.
Yeah.
But then I sort of found that, like, especially after the first round, like, there's a drop off after, I want to say, like 6 or 7. Then there's probably another drop off closer to 20. And then at the end of the first, there's another drop off. And the rest of the draft is pretty much average. But like I said, given, like, you look at the point totals of these guys too, and it's like way better than the past few drafts. And the hype up is certainly there. And Canada looked great at the Holinka. And, it looks like a very strong crop. So it might just not look as strong as I think, just because there's so many good players. I think it drops off, but realistically it doesn't. Like, 2 years time, it could be like, nope, this was another like 2015.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that the number 1 pick is probably going to be Connor Bedard. So we want to ask you, if Connor Bedard wasn't in this draft, who do you think would go number 1? It's tough.
It is a very tough question.
I've always been a very big believer on Fantilli.
Yeah, he looks good.
From the start of the year. Like, some people didn't have him at number 2. Like they had Michkov number 2, and I think at the start of the year that was sort of the obvious go-to, I guess. But I was starting to sour on Michkov, especially. Well, you guys can ask me a question later. I don't know if you have any planned on Michkov, but I sort of soured on him at the start of the year, and I thought, like, I think Fantilli, like, given what he did in the USHL, big, strong-bodied centerman, that's my number 2, and he's been number 2 from the start of the year to the end. He's not moved off there. However, that being said, even in my draft guide, if you guys even just read the top 3 and that's it, like Fantilli, I gave a 6 out of 10 for franchise player. Will Smith, I gave a 5.5. I genuinely think it's that close between those two. I know I'm not in the majority on the Will Smith love. Yeah. I genuinely think he could be like second highest potential in the draft after Bedard, in my opinion. I don't know if he hits that potential. Like, I think Fantilli, whatever his potential is, he has a better chance of hitting. But Will Smith is just a wild card. Like, the skating isn't fully there, but the creativity, the playmaking, playing down the middle, he's one of the most dangerous players I've ever scouted. And you know what? Like, some of the athleticism is a question mark, and I put a big emphasis on athleticism. But you look at some of the top athletes in the world, not even just in hockey right now. And like, sometimes it's like, you don't have to look super fluid, super smooth, super athletic to be one of the best athletes. Jason Robertson is one of my favorite players in the NHL, plays for Dallas. That's kind of my go-to team.
Nice.
He doesn't really look like the most athletic player. Like, even watching him in the playoffs, he's a little bit goofy looking at times, but I mean, he's a monster. And then you look at like Jokic in the NBA, and like, that guy doesn't look like he should be the best NBA player right now, but he pretty much is. And so Will Smith sort of treads that potential in my eyes. It's like, he doesn't look like he's the most athletically gifted kid, but he's just one of those players that is so dangerous, so creative, so smart, and just, I don't know how to explain it. It's like every time I view anybody, if they're playing the US U18 team, if I'm watching one of his teammates, Smith just sort of steals the show every single time.
Gotcha. Now, I've looked at Bob McKenzie's top 32, and this is just based off of his top 32. I looked at this list, and I know that the NHL, based on what has happened in the playoffs this past year, they look for that, big power forward type player. Now, size in this top 32 that Bob McKenzie put together, like, the weight on these kids, like, there are 7 guys that are under 180 pounds, and that's quite shocking to me, I think. Like, normally, I think you would see a lot of undersized guys, but I think that the NHL is moving towards, a little bit more fuller guys, and, it could just be what the kids are doing and how they're training. But do you think that that's a big thing in this top 32, that there are those bigger forwards, bigger defensemen that, are going to be those game changers come playoff time, obviously in the future down the road?
I definitely think so. I'll sort of answer this in 2 parts, because I also think it's, you look at some of the kids, and like you said, there's a couple that are like under 180, and I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. In fact, I think the NHL is also moving towards those types of players as well, because in a lot of scouts' eyes, and what we've seen historically work, is you take guys who are like 5'11", 157, because, in 2 years' time, if you can add 20 pounds to that, like, this is a player who can get bigger, can grow. And you also see it sort of, if a player is like 5'10", 180, or 190, let's say, they're likely done growing. They're going to stay at 5'10". If you see a player who's like 6 foot, 150 pounds, that to me shows me like he could not be done growing. He could hit 6'2" in 2 years. And then you're looking at a guy with a bigger frame, and you have more to work with. Again, you're sort of trying to project these players post draft, 2-3 years time, when they're bigger, faster, stronger. How are they going to look then? I do think that a lot of teams, especially this draft, are going to be looking at those guys that are like playoff big body champions. just because maybe just up to luck. There's quite a few players that are like that. Obviously, Reinbacher is a pretty big defenseman. Simashev is a huge defenseman, but then you've got guys up front like Ryan Leonard, Adam Fantilli. Those guys are going to be guys who are going to be playoff like makers.
Yeah,
like Ryan Leonard, I know he gets compared to Matthew Tkachuk a lot, and I mean, I never made that comparison until I heard it, and I was like, yeah, I could see that. Like he's a very special player.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else would be.
I have the list here. There's Matthew Wood is pretty big.
Matthew Wood is pretty big. Yeah, he's a good guy too. Ethan Gauthier isn't necessarily big, but he's another one of those guys that's going to be a playoff difference maker for sure.
Yep.
I look at other guys too, like Nate Danielson is like 6'1", like almost 200 pounds, natural centerman, great two-way ability. Like that's going to be a guy that I think teams are going to have quite a bit of emphasis on. Colby Barlow as well, I think 6'1", close to 200 pounds as well.
That Daniel Boot guy, the Russian,
yeah,
he looks scary.
Yeah, and his weight says like 185, I think, but he doesn't even look that. He looks really thin. So I'm looking at that.
Oh, really?
Man, you could probably put 30 pounds on this kid.
It says here on Bob McKenzie's that he's 6'5", 203 pounds. So like I don't know what's true and what's not.
Elite Prospects had him listed at 185. I think I don't know. It could be a while ago. It could
so maybe this is based off of. Well, I guess maybe you saw him, but
he doesn't quite look 203.
Draft combine. I don't know if it is off that.
Yeah, it's fairly accurate if it is off the combine.
Yeah,
I don't know if, but when I don't know how many Russians went.
True. That is right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was in the middle of writing, so I'm not. I was wanting to pay attention, but I was also wanting to grind that out. Other guys too, like I have him ranked 33, and I even put in my write-up about him that he deserves to be a first rounder. I was super mad that he missed the cut according to my rankings.
I hope you say his name. I have somebody on my list that I hope makes the first round.
Okay, let's see if we got the same player, because I feel like you might be thinking.
Is he from America?
He is from America.
Is his first initial a D?
It is Danny Nelson.
Yes.
He plays like a bull. And I've always been a fan of those players. They work out in the playoffs. They are just a heavy set. Just, oh my God, it's so fun to watch them. And a lot of the times they work out. Like, to give an example, I went to the OHL Cup last year as well and watched a kid by the name of Jacob Battaglia with JRC playing for Kingston now, I'm pretty sure. And I said, he's got to be a first rounder. Please be a first rounder. And he did get drafted into the first round of the OHL. And he had a pretty good season with Kingston. And I hope he works out, because he'll be ranked pretty high on my list next year too, if he's sort of following how Danny Nelson looks. Just those players that play like bulls, where it's just like they have good hands, but like they just look so top heavy that they will bulldoze you to get a point.
That makes me excited. I'm so glad that I had the same guy.
Great work ethic too. Again, it's sort of the size that comes with, you could be big and I could overlook you if you just don't
100%.
Have that, I don't know, dog in him, I guess. But Danny
exactly.
Nelson, that dog.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I have like this fantasy league. It's like all 32 teams. I forget the fan tracks. It's based off of that, and you pick a team and you do it like every single year, fantasy wise. You can trade with everybody. Right. And we had a draft this year, and I think I got him in like the second round, and I was just like, okay, like I just stumbled across his name because of his size, and I was just like, yeah, I hope this guy makes it good in a couple of years. So it feels good to find somebody, diamond in a rough almost.
He is so much fun. I think NHL teams are high on him too. I think he could get actually chosen in the first. I think he's around that like 30 to 40 range. So not uncommon that guy goes in the late first. He might hear his name early on day 2, and I really hope he does. Like, just a tank of a player.
Yeah, wicked. Now, we always ask our guests on here, because it's draft time and the lists have been pretty different from what we've asked. We need to know your top 5. Who's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at this draft coming up here?
Ooh, my ranking or like a little bit of a mock prediction?
Ooh, let's go mock prediction.
Yeah.
Let's go mock prediction.
Yeah.
All right. I got Chicago taking Bedard.
Yeah.
That one's pretty obvious. I've heard some rumblings of Anaheim wanting to take Michkov.
I have too.
You always hear those rumblings,
Of
and
course.
I can't see them choosing a Russian second overall when there's been that much, I don't know, uncertainty.
Of course,
I'll use that word, uncertainty. Not just the Russian factor, but a lot of other things. Like I have Michkov 5 on my list. He could be much lower if his athleticism wasn't just absolutely nasty. He's one of the most athletic players, but I think the Ducks will go Fantilli at 2. I think there's no other way around it. That's got to be who you choose if you're picking second, in my eyes.
Yeah, I think they need that number 2 center anyways in Anaheim.
Number 3. All right. Feeling the pressure. Columbus. I could see them going with Carlson. I know he's a big guy, and I think Columbus likes their big guys, and I know that they need a centerman, but I'm not sure if Carlson projects as a centerman in my eyes.
Okay.
If I'm Columbus, and I tweeted this out right after the draft lottery, and again, this is just going back to me being a huge Fresh Prince of Bel-Air fan, but I sincerely think if I was the GM of Columbus, I'm calling Will Smith's name at 3. And you know what? I think he's a centerman. I think he's a more projectable as a centerman than Carlson is. That's my pick for 3.
Gotcha.
You're going to have to remind me who has the 4th pick. I know who has the
4th.
5th.
4th pick. Oh my God.
Is it San Jose?
San Jose.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you're right.
San Jose. San Jose doesn't. Oh my God, this is going to end up looking like my actual rankings. San Jose loves their WHL players.
Okay.
And I know that they heavily scout the WHL. I know this guy is a little bit lower on Bob McKenzie's list. I don't know if you have that up right now.
Yep.
But I don't know where Benson is on that.
Okay, yeah. He's at 9.
He's at 9. To be fair, I think Lucas Raymond was 8th or 9th in his draft year as well. And he got chosen 4th by Detroit. They say it's off the board. Again, that's off the board to NHL scouts. I think a lot of us had Raymond as the 3rd or 4th best prospect. I have Benson as the 4th. I just see, again, I think he's ranked a little bit lower because of his size, but it's like
he could put down that 20 pounds.
He's the same height as Bedard.
Yep.
And he's like 20 pounds lighter or 15 pounds lighter than Bedard.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I think he's gotten consistently better and better and better over the years. Very gifted kid, very athletic, great work ethic. If I'm San Jose, I'm looking at him or Carlson, and I know San Jose, this is tricky too because San Jose has also drafted a lot of Swedish prospects.
Yeah.
But I got to go with my gut. And I got to say, I truly think San Jose is going to go off the board and choose Benson at 4.
That's fair. And then 5, you have Michkov still?
I would not. This is where it will actually change out. I think a lot of Habs fans want the Habs to take Michkov.
Right. I think that in a franchise eyes, like they have the talent, like some of the top talent now, like they can wait until they're that good and get the draft capital throughout the years. That's true. It is a very big risk, I think.
He's a smaller player. Again, it sounds weird to make that argument after I just said, well, Benson's not that small.
Yeah.
But for the type of player that Benson is, Benson will play down the middle. He'll get rough and dirty. Michkov won't. Okay. Very perimeter player. A lot of useless shot attempts. Doesn't care for defense. Not super great in transition. Again, he's a highlight reel monster. And he's been successful at every level that he's played at. But for 3 straight years, because Michkov's name has been in the prospect world for a long time, for 3 straight years, I've had the same criticisms of him. I don't see if it'll translate as well. And if Montreal feels the same, and again, Michkov's sort of one-dimensional, right? Great shooter for the most part, but they have Caulfield, and Caulfield's smaller as well. If I'm the Habs, I'm looking at taking Ryan Leonard at number 5. And there are some people on Twitter who are going to heavily disagree with me on that. He is not top 5 worthy. Oh man, that NTDP team is insane. I sincerely think Leonard, he finished 7 on my board. I would not be mad if I got him at 5. And I think he really fits what the Habs are going to be looking for as well.
Yeah, no, he's 6 foot at it says 190 pounds here, which is huge in weight wise. And he, like, if he has that dog in him, that's something that, the Habs need, or it could really benefit Caulfield's scoring touch in that lineup.
Yeah. And you look at Michkov and you go, yeah, but he's a goal scorer. So is Leonard. Leonard has one of the best shots in the draft after Bedard, maybe a couple of others, but still one of the best shots in the class. And I mean, watching the U18 World Championships, went into overtime, I think. Went into overtime, the U.S. versus Sweden. I just remember seeing Leonard get the puck. I just went, like, even before it went in, he's scoring here. I've done that a few times with a couple of players where I'm like, I know some people say it every time and then they get surprised when they get it right. But like, I don't say it very often, but I was like, I think he's going to score here. And he did. And the only other time that I called that out was Pittsburgh against Ottawa for the Eastern Conference Finals. And I just remember Crosby passing it to Kessel. I'm like, game's over. And then Kessel scored. But I really think Leonard is a great shooter. So if you're in Montreal and you do want a goal scorer, go with the bigger guy here who plays a more well-rounded game.
Yeah. So it kind of works into our next question that we had up. Your thoughts on Michkov? I know you already kind of touched on it, but who would you compare him to? And, where would you see him fall in the draft if he is falling out of the top 5?
I don't think we'll be waiting for him long. I said a little bit ago that he could even fall down to the 20s. I guess that's still true depending on how he interviews with teams.
Yeah.
And what happens over the next little bit and the contract and, Russian politics, all of that. So I don't really know. I don't see him falling past Washington, if I'm honest. I think if there's going to be a team that takes him in the top 10, if he slides down to Washington, he's getting drafted by Washington. Yeah. He's got Alex Ovechkin there. I think Russia, again, they're sort of going to have a say in where Michkov goes. And I really think that if Washington, sort of nudges, like he'll be going with the other, generational Russian talent, and could we get him earlier because of that? I think, the KHL might actually allow him to. We'll see how that plays out. As for player comparison, oh man, I really don't know, because he's a very different player than what I usually see. I mean, we're talking a 5'10", very active, very athletic, great mobility, great skater with an awesome shot, but just, it feels harsh to say this, but limited hockey IQ. Decision.
Like I remember early years on with Alex Ovechkin, like he didn't play defense at all. And obviously I don't think he's that high in pedigree, but I know that people had Kirill high on list, but yeah, he slid so far. Like I don't know if those are the two names that come off the top of my head, but I was curious about your.
Even Ovechkin, like 6'2", I think he's like 240 pounds now.
Yeah, that's true.
Granted, he wasn't that big when he stepped into the league. And I know he's not as active now. I mean, he's getting up there in age.
Of course.
Still one of the best goal scorers. But when he was younger, Ovechkin did not shy away from the middle at all. I mean, you think about the NHL in total, one of the most iconic goals is him driving down the middle, falling down and sort of just over the head.
Yeah, you're right.
He played down the middle and he was aggressive and he had that dog in him. He played with a bite. And I go back to watching Craig Button's rankings on TV with my dad, who's a hockey fan too, and they got to Michkov. And right before they even started showing the highlights, I said, "Watch this," because my dad agrees with my opinions.
That's a good father.
Yeah. And I just remember I said, "Watch, there will not be a single goal that he scores down the middle. Everything will come from the outside. Even if he's going towards the middle, nothing actually comes from the middle itself." And sure enough, they showed 8 or 9 clips and not one of them down the middle. So for a 5'10" player to play like that, who over 3 seasons hasn't really hopped off the perimeter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So we want to get. I know you've already given us some of these guys that are rising in the draft. We want to know what guys are going to be dropping in the draft. I guess based on Bob McKenzie's list or anyone else's list that you think are just they're not going to be as good as what they're touted to be.
As for McKenzie's list, I don't really know. If I was to compare it to my rankings, there's a couple of guys who are going to slide down. Not only mine, but a lot of public scouts' opinions as well.
Yep.
I think this guy is 27 on Bob McKenzie's list, or 29 even. Andrew Cristal, and I really liked him from the start of the season, but it was really my last few viewings and then me crunching the numbers of how I actually feel about him. Put him at number 8 on my list, and I think that's probably above. I have seen him in the top. I've seen him in the top 8 a couple of times, but I feel pretty comfortable with him in that 8 to maybe 13 range. I just find him super dangerous. Sure, the skating isn't one of the most athletic. You don't have to be a great skater when you play a dangerous game. And I remember we argued in our meeting. I said, I have not seen a player this smart, this creative, and this dangerous since Cole Perfetti. And Perfetti was touted as a Einstein-like hockey IQ, and I seriously think Cristal is in the same boat. I even said the amount of times that he is driving it from the inside to the outside and then moving the puck back to the slot, he's one of the most dangerous players. And someone actually looked up the metrics in that meeting and said, yeah, he ranks 99th percentile, or top 1% basically of slot passes per 60. And I'm like, yeah. And the fact that it works out so often. So I'd say Cole Perfetti with maybe not as dangerous of a shot, which I still think is worthy of a top 13 selection at the least, but he could end up getting called on day 2, which I think is crazy.
Crazy, yeah.
Another player that I have high that I think is going to fall down, and again, it's one of those players who are underweight, I guess, 5'11", 155, is Grayson Sachin, who had a very successful season with Seattle. Puck protection is there, puck possession is there. He tries to do too much, and though that makes me mad when I watch him, I would rather that. I'm watching a kid who has the puck on a stick quite a bit per game. And yeah, he makes mistakes, but he's getting more and more comfortable. And that will work itself out. I mean, it has to, because as you move up levels, coaches are really going to be hammering on you to fix that. Yeah. I think he could. So I have him at number 15 on my list. The last guy I'll say will likely slide down, sort of based off his size, Timur Mukhanov, 5'8" Russian, plays like Matt Zuccarello, and I really think that he's going to end up like Matt Zuccarello. But again, teams are going to look at 5'8" Russian player. Yeah, he'll probably hear his name on day 2 for sure. I don't think he will go in the first round. And he's a guy that I actually was very critical of throughout the year, especially to our Russian scout who really liked him. And then it was my last viewings, again, crunching the numbers. And I'm always surprised with what I end up with. And I ended up with Mukhanov at 19, and I'm like, okay. So I just went against everything that I've been saying this year. Because I sincerely think this, he's got a good shot to be a potential top 6 player. So to get him around pick 20 even as a top 6 potential, that's pretty big.
Of course. Now, of course, we wouldn't be a Leafs podcast if we didn't ask you this question. Now, we talked about it a little bit earlier. We have the 28th pick, if you were the Leafs, and of course, if they do not trade it, who would you pick if you were the Leafs?
Ooh, sort of depends who's on the board. Some guys are falling. They're the Leafs are wild. They are always wild because no matter who they pick, people are going to be mad and people are going to be excited. Leafs prospects and the team itself is always the most overrated and the most underrated in every category. So there's some Leafs fans who say you do not need defense. We've cleaned up our defense, this and that. I think it wouldn't hurt to add a defense. I would think that the big three are all going to be gone by pick 28, like Simashev, Reinbecker, ASP. They're all going to be gone. So it's very hard to get a defense at 28. If Willander is there, that would be great. I don't expect that he'll be there at 28 either.
What about Bonk? I'm from London, so I've watched him quite a bit. I just quick kind of question on that.
I really liked Bonk. I really wanted to like Bonk, and I did for most of the year. I said, yeah, he's a potential first rounder. And then on my final ranking, he slipped down to 46. Okay. So I don't know if he's the guy to go with. I don't think it hurts having a London guy. He's close to Toronto, playing in the NHL. He's similar, and London does a fantastic job at developing prospects even after their draft. So I would love Bonk at that range. Bo Akey as well with Barrie. I think Akey is just fantastic. Now, if we're talking forwards, I really do think that the Leafs have added quite a few grinders. So I don't know if that's really the route that you guys need to take. You probably don't need a Danny Nelson. You probably don't need a Quentin Musty.
I would love Danny.
James really wants Quentin Musty.
As much as people would like that, I think you're looking at I think even Ethan Gauthier had kind of fallen down on Bob's list towards the end. I'm not sure what number he is, but if he's available at 28, that's a guy who's going to perform in the playoffs. Solid winger. I see him as a great potential. You're going to probably hit on him as a middle six guy. So even having a third winger or a second line winger who's going to be able to score goals in the playoffs. He loves getting down and dirty in the slot. Gauthier would be fantastic to take. That's who I think I would take. If I was at 28 and he's available, I would go for either Gauthier or I might swing on Bonk.
Gotcha. Now, I know you've been doing this only for a couple of years, and we've talked to a few scouts, and Nyes was actually high on a couple of people's lists. Now, did you have Nyes high, or did you kind of have Nyes at where the Leafs drafted him? And I know, of course, sometimes teams get lucky in general, and the player that they want falls to them. But I just wanted to get your take on Nyes, because he's really developed into somebody that I think is going to be that playoff type guy for the Leafs to come in the future.
Right. Also sort of similar to Gauthier. That year, I didn't quite follow the same formula that I'd been following in my guide last year and this year.
Of course, yeah.
So it's hard to say. I kind of based my rankings off of what the public sphere had about people, and then if I liked them more, I would put them higher than the census. If I didn't like them as much as the census, I would lower them. I think I finished with Nyes around the same area as Toronto, but I'm also in a keeper fantasy league with my dad and a bunch of his old buddies that they've been doing this league for like 35 years.
Oh, wow.
More than half of his life has been spent in this league. So I was putting out on Facebook post-draft, I pretty much counted down from 32 to 1 who had the best drafts, and the Leafs have always hit. They have always finished in the top half. And it's not like the Leafs had an exuberant amount of picks. So for them to finish in the top half means that they've been wildly successful. Obviously, Ty Voy is well in there. But I remember I said very good things about Nyes, and I said he didn't fall he wasn't too far off of where I have him ranked, but I seriously think like you're looking at an NHL talent. Like for sure, he's going to be playing in the NHL. So looking back, like if I had followed my formula that I follow now, Nees would definitely be in the first round and likely in the early 20s. But at the time, I had him around where the Leafs took him.
Gotcha.
Wicked. Now, last question of the pod tonight, Gavin. So we want to know, what's your favorite draft moment, or do you have any good draft stories you can share with us?
This is very funny because I grew up a Senators fan.
Oh wow!
Okay.
So not very often are they a good team. But it was my dad's team, and I absolutely love Jason Spezza. And you know what? Ottawa had been bad for so long, and then when Spezza was about to be traded, I think that he was rumored St. Louis, Columbus, or Dallas. I said I won't be a St. Louis or Columbus fan, but if he went to Dallas, I'd be a fan of Dallas. He goes there, so I picked Dallas as my second team. So I'll sort of give two good draft stories. My criticisms of Ottawa continued in 2021. I really didn't want them to pick Wallstedt. I was sort of against that at 11 or 10. I didn't even have him as my top ranked goaltender, which I know is definitely against the public's opinion. I might eat my words on that too. Goaltenders are weird. But I didn't want that. So they said, the Ottawa Senators are pleased to select. And I'm just sitting there like fingers crossed. I'm like, please don't say from Sweden. Please don't say from Sweden. And they go from the U.S. national team. And I'm thinking Chaz Lucius. Like we got Lucius here.
Oh, I do.
I'm like, yes. And they go Tyler Boucher. And I feel awful saying this because at the end of the day, this is a teenager. But I just sat there and I'm like, what? Just yelling. I can't believe that they did that. And even looking back, like I had Boucher in my 40s. I
think a lot of people did.
He still has a decent chance of being an NHLer, but he's a bottom six guy. He's a guy that you use to fill out. He's a grinder. He's an enforcer, sort of. But at 10, I just thought like that is one of the worst picks I've really come across. So I think that was the 2021 draft. So again, I'm a fan of Ottawa and Dallas.
I love that.
Yeah. So Ottawa finishes dead last when I put out my list onto that keeper fantasy site because I used a lot of math, and like they were the first and only team that I've went through the draft with who ended up with a negative value score. They finished at -2, and the next closest team only had 40 points. But in that same year, and I think Dallas has drafted tremendously, which makes me even more of a fan of Dallas. I think one of the best drafting teams in the NHL as it stands. And they had finished at the top with like 1,084 points. The only team to break 1,000 points while I've been, kind of keeping track of that. I mean, they grabbed Stankoven, they grabbed Johnston, who I did not have as a first. It's a COVID year, right? It's all very weird. But even when they had made the pick, and I'll be critical of my team if they make a bad pick, as you just heard me say with Boucher, like I'm not at home. But even then I was like, okay. My dad's like, didn't you have him as a second? I'm like, yeah, but like I could see it. Like I very much could see it. And Johnston popped off for them. And then you look at like that year where they took Robertson, they took Heiskanen, and they took Ottinger in the same round. And it's just Dallas has been hitting constantly. They take Stankoven in 2021. They take a kid by the name of Ayrton Martino, who I'm a big fan of as well. Dallas just absolutely crushed it that year. And I think the 2021 draft was both the worst to be a fan of for me for Ottawa and the best for me to be a fan of for Dallas.
That's funny. Those are cool stories. I like that. Gavin, this has been a privilege. I thank you so much for coming on. Before you go, where can everybody catch your website and all that jazz?
Right. So the website is recruitscouting.com. From there, you'll find a lot of prospect talk. You'll find rankings. You'll find some player profiles. You'll find my draft guide as well. which I've had the help from a lot of guys at Recruit. Pretty much all of them have written pieces, and man, hats off to them because they've had dedication all year. I've just been sending them lists and being like, write these prospects. And it's like, at the end of the day, like you're looking at 500 throughout the year. So some of these guys are writing on prospects that aren't even going to be featured, and like their work isn't even going to be put out there. But they don't even mind. They grind through it. So yeah, our whole team is great. Further, you can find me on Twitter at NHL Chiasson, Chiasson. And yeah, hopefully get to meet some more people.
Of course. It was such a privilege to have you on for a draft show. I'm sure we'll have you on again to get your take maybe on how the draft went and how the Leafs did. Again, thank you so much. And I hope everybody enjoyed this episode with Gavin. Have a wonderful night. Peace.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.